How's it going, everybody? Bryan Alvarez here on Wrestling Observer Live. We are here every day, Monday through Friday, noon Pacific, 3 Eastern, Sundays, 3 Pacific, 6 Eastern. We got a lot to get into on the show today, and believe it or not, a lot of it is not WWE today. All sorts of news, including this from The Wrap. The All Elite Wrestling AEW Turner deal is now, quote, virtually done. A person with knowledge of the plan tells The Wrap exclusively. Current plans call for the partnership to be announced through select press 1 hour before Warner Media's Wednesday upfront event, the individual said. The arrangement made between the parties called for a small group of reporters to be informed of the agreement on an embargoed basis the evening before. AEW President Tony Khan and some of his wrestlers are expected to be in attendance at the Madison Square Garden, the mecca of pro wrestling, pitched to media buyers, a person told us. Presentation begins at 10 a.m. New York City time. Current plans call for Turner to begin airing a weekly AEW wrestling show this fall on TNT. Financial terms of the deal are not expected to be disclosed, as AEW is not a publicly traded company. The leader in the space, WWE, is. When reached, a spokeswoman for Turner declined to comment on the story. A rep for AEW has not responded to The Wrap's request for comment. Last month, The Wrap reported that All Elite Wrestling and Turner were in advanced talks for a TV deal. At the time, negotiations made it unclear whether or not an agreement would be in place by next week's Upfront, which is when television networks debut their new fall shows for advertisers. And it quotes here a tweet from Front Row Bryan, talking about how Warner, TBS, TNT will present AEW Wrestling at the Upfronts to advertisers next month. Warner Media Turner Upfronts are currently scheduled for May 15th. This is how networks announce their content lineup for the fall season. Since then, complex negotiations put hopes for the Upfront in jeopardy. Our individual with knowledge of the talks had told us. We now know the details of the public rollout plan, which was finalized on Wednesday. So it does appear that All Elite Wrestling is going to Turner weekly, live weekly television. We'll talk about this more after the break, and some new AEW signings and more. Wrestling Observer Live. Back in the show, Bryan Alvarez here, Wrestling Observer Live. Mike Sempervive, also of WrestlingObserver.com.
Man, you sound exasperated, boss.
I'm actually laughing because I got an amazing email during the break.
Yeah.
So, first off, I actually had to go back to see if this guy had sent me other emails, and he has. And I'll just go back to the email he sent on May 2nd. This fellow's name is Mike. The subject line is, WWE is still great. Bro, WWE is just fine. Ratings hardly matter in 2019. People watch on YouTube, TV, PS View, Hulu, and Pirate Shell. So he's an idiot. I've explained this 1,000 times, that YouTube, TV, PS View, Hulu, they all count in the ratings that he's talking about here that don't matter in 2019. But he sent me this email during the break after I talked about AEW and Turner. AEW will not tickle WWE. How do you know they will be on TNT or TBS? Even if they do manage to do it, they will be drawing less than 500,000 and proceed to get canceled. I hope Cody fails.
Did he say tickle?
Can you imagine, desiring for AEW to fail in 2019? Can you imagine that? Can you imagine being such a fan of WWE that you watch these shows nowadays? And by the way, I know that hardcore WWE fans think that they're being really cool to the WWE people, and that people in WWE are very appreciative of them sticking up for them. But dude, let me tell you, morale in WWE is at I can't say an all-time low, but it is bad. People are miserable there. And Mike here is sticking up for them and telling us all how it's great and praying for the failure of All Elite Wrestling. Can you imagine? I can't imagine.
Can we specify the mics here, please?
It's not you. So anyway, it appears they will be going to Turner. Nothing is official till it's official, but that was announced in The Wrap today. Next Wednesday appears to be the announcement. And in addition to that, they have today announced a bunch of new signings. They have signed Angelico, formerly of Lucha Underground, AAA, etc. They have signed Jack Evans.
Both shocking moves, you know.
Jack Evans has been signed. Jerry Lynn will be there as a coach/producer.
That's a good one. That's good.
Rick Knox there as an AEW referee.
Who?
Rick Knox. Don't say who. He's a very famous referee, Rick Knox. So
Red
all of
Shoes
these
Knox.
people have been signed to All Elite Wrestling, and it's looking like a television deal will likely be announced next week. So thank God there will be some sort of alternative. I don't know how successful it's going to be. No one knows. No one knows. Tony Khan doesn't know. Nobody knows how successful or not successful All Elite Wrestling is going to be. Okay? Now, the only thing that I can say as a positive is that if ever there was a time for an alternative to take advantage of the massive failures of WWE in terms of hooking viewers, now is the time. I mean, we're talking one of the reasons that WCW was able to overtake WWF in 1995 was because WWF sucked. That's just a fact of the matter. They were doing the new generation, and like Kevin Nash was the champion, and they were coming off just the most wretched period in the early 90s where they just lost tons and tons of fans and people quit watching wrestling. It was the perfect time for another company to take over. Now, there is a big difference, and that is that WCW had been around for a long time. And WCW was running WCW Saturday Night on Saturdays and doing good numbers for WCW Saturday Night. All Elite Wrestling is starting from zero. They're starting from scratch. This is not the same thing. The business is very, very different right now. But WWE is at its weakest period in terms of fan... What would the word be?
Engagement?
Engagement! Thank you, Mike. You are useful for something. In terms of fan engagement... This company is at its lowest level since the early 90s. So there literally is no better time for an alternative to get national television and give us something other than WWE to watch. It does not appear it's going to be going head-to-head on Mondays, which is probably for the best. Looks like it's probably going to be Wednesdays, but we don't know. And we'll see what happens next Wednesday.
It's good to have options. So I try to do shows with like Brian Fritz and Brian Last. And then there's you, which I need an alternative from sometimes. And I think we all need an alternative from WWE sometimes, some to a differing degree than others. But this is still, even when they announced the show, I mean, great, that's another step forward, but we are still, even though now we will be barreling towards it, it's still just going to be months of speculation and banter and all that sort of stuff, which is going to be great for this show, and I'm sure great for people online to kind of go off about, but right now it's still just a roster, and how much production will be put in by TNT? What's the show going to look like? How are things going to go? What's the announcing? You know, how is that progressing along? How is Marvez doing as far as, has he been in a box practicing play-by-play? Just, there's a lot of questions, and there's a lot of just, it's a very interesting time, that is for sure. And like you said, there is a hole to punch through for them right now that WWE has left them. But even if they didn't, look, can you imagine if Impact would have been actually run correctly over some time? I mean, there's still, no matter what, there's still a place for an alternative that does not have to be WWE size, and they're certainly not going to be. So you just got to get in where you fit in, and they need to play their cards right, obviously, and they need to make sure that they're putting on the best foot they can forward on TNT. But, you know, like you said, if it's going to be any time, now is certainly the time.
Caller, you're on the air, dude. What's going on, bro?
I have a question about the Gino Hernandez documentary from last night. I think more people believe that he was murdered now that they showed a 1-hour documentary.
Did you watch it?
Yeah, I watched it.
Okay, well, no one in their right mind could watch it and then come to the conclusion that he was murdered.
Well, that John Royal guy told his mom that
he wasn't.
Gino owed him a lot of money, but then when they interviewed John Royal, he said that he never said that, so that was a little bit suspicious, I thought.
It was suspicious that two people had different stories?
It sure was.
Okay. Well, you know, Ryan, I don't think a lot of people think that he was murdered after watching that documentary. I could be wrong.
You know,
I'm pretty sure that...
I'm sure you know some people, I think we all know some people that live life to the fullest and burn the candle at both ends and live a lifestyle.
Everyone in the 80s.
Picking themselves up with, I mean, at any point, though, where it's just like, you know, cocaine and the psychosis that they can cause, especially when you're, just alone on the drug, let alone the life you're living as a professional wrestler. I think it's acceptable now that story had been going around for a long time, and I could see why it did, and they did a fantastic job. I mean, I know people have talked about the Von Erichs one and the Brody one. I think by far this was the most fascinating one, and I think just really I thought was great. And they thought they did a great job kind of flushing out all of those stories, and even in the bonus one too. And I know they put this up online, and I think they put it up on a couple other places as well too. Of they never got into it because of the story about the murder, but Paul Bosch, and whether it was Gino was his son or not, and they debunked that one and got that one done and out of the way. I mean, his mother talking really answered a lot of questions on a story that has been, left out there with ends dangling for quite some time.
Hey, on the air, what's going on?
Hey, what's up, guys? Tim in Miami. I was going to ask this question yesterday, but I was on hold for
I know. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Dropped like a bag of dirt.
We got 1 minute, so go quick.
So Dave was talking about how WWE, they had their backs up against the wall this week to do a good rating, or to at least not tank. And apart from the wild card thing, the thing that I noticed this week was a severe de-emphasis of the women. Raw had a 30-second lazy squash, and then Becky came out. No moment of bliss.
There were far fewer women on the show this week. That is true.
Was that a conscious thing? Is that like a tacit acknowledgement that some of those mid-card women segments are ratings death, or was that just a fluke?
I think we'll find out next week. I mean, honest to God, Tim, anytime you ask me if something was consciously done in WWE, it's like my immediate reaction is no, or it was like way overthought. I mean, it's possible. I mean, as we talked about on the Observer Radio show, I mean, we did have someone go back and look at the first to third hour drops over the course of 3-4 months, and if it was a women's main event, I mean, it did drop way more than if it was a men's main event. And whatever that's worth is whatever that's worth, but I don't know if that's the reason that they did that this week or if it was just a coincidence. We will, I guess, find out going forward. Back in a moment with more. Dave Meltzer, actually, Wrestling Observer Live. Back in the show, Bryan Alvarez here, Wrestling Observer Live. Mike Sempervive, also of WrestlingObserver.com. Dave Meltzer joining us here today. And Dave, the Rap's got a big story today about AEW and Turner and next Wednesday. What's your take on all of it?
I mean, it's very possible. I mean, it would coincide with a lot of things that I've heard, but I don't know that to be factual. But, I mean, it's certainly what it coincides with a lot that I've heard, yeah. Yeah, I didn't see anything in the story that I thought, at least the updated version of the story, that looked wrong to me. Unlike the other stories that they did, where immediately I read it and I go, okay, this is wrong and this is wrong and this is wrong.
Which stories were those? The
previous ones, the previous one that the Rap did on this thing.
What did they screw up that time?
They screwed up the streaming. They screwed up.
Oh, for the same article where they made the corrections.
Well, the one before they made the one before where they had the show would be streamed on all these platforms that it wasn't going to be streamed on. The pre-show will be streamed on it.
I see.
On a lot of social media platforms, most likely. And there was a couple of other things in the first article. I think that the first article said that they were paying for the time, and that's not true. So, I mean, there were a few other things that were wrong in the first article.
Yes, as an earlier version of the story listed YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook as streaming options for Double or Nothing. These platforms are for specific pre-show events. The Rep regrets the error. So, and I did have people today asking if Double or Nothing was going to be streaming on YouTube, and I was baffled where they got that. And now, apparently, I know. So there you go.
Well, they're gonna the pre-show. They're going to try to get the pre-show. It doesn't look like it's going to be on American television. It's going to be on UK television, and in the United States. In Canada, the idea is to get the most viewers possible. If it's not on television, they're going to stream it everywhere they can. So, yeah, I mean, that's just logical.
Dave, just kind of sticking with streaming just for a second and assuming that they're going to join up with TNT, it leaves open the opportunity to possibly be placed on Bleacher Report Live. You've talked a lot about the Zone and ESPN Plus. Do you have any idea, and I know they're really in their infancy right now, they have UEFA and a couple of other things there, but do you have any idea how Bleacher Report Live is functioning right now, and if you think that's going to be a good fit to have on demand for people who don't have cable and don't have access to TNT?
I do not know how. I haven't really heard much about Bleacher Report, so I don't really know.
Because it seems so insignificant, but I mean, it's a nice thing to build. You know, obviously the history of cable and satellite and pay-per-view and all that sort of stuff has been built on Ring Sports. And if you don't have anything, you know, trying to broker a deal and maybe being the place where you could land an AEW and land at least a captive wrestling fan. I mean, it's worked in the past. It might be something that may make sense, I would assume, especially for people without cable.
Yeah, I think. I mean, obviously, whoever they signed the TV deal with was going to look for a streaming component. That was consistent with everybody that they were talking with. You know, on the US TV side, they all, and I think that also ITV as well, because I know that you know, ITV is going to have exclusivity to the UK version, whether it's, you know, obviously it's going to be ITV box office, but if there's a streaming component, it's going to be an ITV streaming component. It's not going to be anybody else. And the same thing with the U.S. I think whoever they get the TV deal with, whether it is Turner or somebody else, they will, you know, the pay-per-views will probably in some form or some content, and probably a lot of content will probably end up on the streaming service because it's probably it's whoever they go with is going to have a joint deal, which would include streaming. Yes, TV and streaming.
This person here says, being the elite has not really increased over months from around 159 to 260. Should we be concerned that free on YouTube, they can't crack 500,000? You'll be expected to do good TV numbers.
Well, it's all different. You know, obviously, whatever station you're on is going to be promoting it. TV is going to get you new fans. If you're looking at, like, the idea that they're going to go in there with the audience that they have today and do 1 million TV viewers, that's probably not going to happen. The idea of being on TV is to build your number, not to, if it's only to, you know, if all you can do is get the fan base that you have today with no television and then move them to television, you're not going to have a successful television product. You know, I mean, that's the reality. I mean, you could have used the same logic as far as like with Impact, when Impact first went on television. You know, Impact was doing, I mean, they didn't have streaming and things like that, but, you know, Impact, when they were on Fox Sports Net, just as an example, were doing, you know, 250,000 viewers, and the idea is, okay, we've got 250,000 viewers. If we go on Spike, that number's going to be terrible. Well, they were, you know, at 1 million on Spike very quickly, you know, in a bad time slot. And then, you know, they got up to about where they were pretty steady at close to 1.5 million as they grew the audience. So, look, if they can't grow the audience with television, then they're not going to be a successful television platform, unless they shock everyone and are strong the first week. But you know, it's the idea where you go, oh, they only have 250,000 people or 200,000 people watching Being the Elite, and a lot of those people are probably counted multiple times. I don't even when I look at like streaming YouTube numbers, I always like take them with a huge grain of salt. The real numbers are probably way under what are reported, because people will watch multiple times. People will watch for 2 minutes and then, you know, click off and then click back on and all that. So those numbers really, they're very, very misleading, and on a high level, not a low level.
And I mean, they're misleading in every way. I mean, WWE's got tons and tons of people that are watching, allegedly, on YouTube and Twitter and Facebook and whatever, but their ratings are sinking. And when they cut all that out on Monday, I mean, it was the exact same number. So, I mean, it's... Well,
you just watch next week. And granted, next week, you know, it depends on what NBA stuff they have against them. They may actually have an easy week this week. But if they don't, you know... But whatever it is, I mean, we can look at, you know, even down the line, when WWE is now cutting back on YouTube videos, you're going to, you know, I don't really think you're going to see any significant difference in the television rating. I mean, maybe we will, very small, but I don't think so.
As far as TV goes, there are still a lot of fans who believe that, like, people don't watch TV, and if you're doing poor numbers on YouTube, it's going to translate into poor numbers on TV. And the reality is there are still a lot of people that watch TV. Like tons, millions, tens, hundreds of millions of people are watching TV. And
everybody watches some TV.
Yes, there's no.
But I mean, you know, I don't see like using YouTube numbers to correlate to TV numbers. I've never seen any study that shows anything, that one relates to another. It's just like using Twitter numbers to correlate to TV numbers. Everybody that tries to do that finds out immediately when studying it that there's no correlation whatsoever. TV is TV. It's its own beast. The station helps a lot. You're on a strong station, you're going to do bigger numbers than you're on a weak station. So it all depends on the station, the time slot. And eventually, in the long run, you're going to win and lose based on your product. But, if you have the exact same product on Pursuit TV or USA Network, you're not going to have the same audience. It won't even be a comparable audience. It's the difference between, whatever it is, 20,000 and 2.5 million.
This person here says, will AEW have a wider reach than WWE and TV if you consider Turner and ITV?
Well, it won't have a greater reach than SmackDown on Fox. It'll have the exact... If they're on Turner, they're going to have essentially the same reach as WWE on USA. Will they have the same number of viewers? Probably not. But the reach, yes. And in the UK, they're going to have far greater reach. ITV4 is in every home. Sky's in only a small percentage of homes. I mean, they will actually go on, this show at midnight on ITV on the 25th, or it's actually the 26th their time. But that show will be probably the highest rated pro wrestling television show in the UK since, World of Sport on ITV, which didn't last, but was, drew way more viewers than WWE ever drew, or has drawn lately. I won't say ever drew, because WWE in the past drew very well. But I mean, WWE is doing 50,000 or less for Raw and SmackDown these weeks, and that special is going to, I don't know what number it's going to do, but it'll be 50,000 easy.
And this person here, in terms of WWE, says, last night on Observer Radio, or maybe it was Tuesday night, he says, please ask Dave why Vince is wanting to keep the brand split. Garrett kind of brought it up the other night on Observer Radio. Why won't he just end this brand split?
It becomes really confusing when it comes to booking house shows, not doing it, but you can do it. It makes things harder, and also it makes it look like they failed at something, so this way there's no public perception of failure. We're just tweaking it, and to make it better. So, I mean, those are probably the two best reasons.
All right, what do we got on the Observer this coming week?
Oh, God, it's just tons. Big details on the AEW story, between the ITV deal, the television deals, streaming deals. Very long, complete breakdown of the XFL, the finances of the XFL, the television deals, what they mean, and really the fascinating thing of the XFL versus UFC when it comes to exposure in television and everything for the next couple of years. And then coverage of the New Japan Dontaku, where New Japan stands in the U.S. and in Japan. Coverage of the Dragon Gate shows, a lot of WWE backstage, tons of WWE backstage news, AEW signings, AEW future direction, all kinds of stuff like that.
Well, Dave, I want to thank you so much for doing the show here today. The New Observer's up on the front page of WrestlingObserver.com right now. If you sign up, not only do you get all of the new Observers, but there's a back issue that goes up every week. There are thousands of Observers in the archives dating back to 1991, when Dave switched from the typewriter to the computer. Those are all up there on the website. And all the shows, new shows every day, 10,000 archived shows, and so much more. And we'll be back in a moment with your calls and text messages. Wrestling Observer Live. We are being flooded with incredible text messages and emails here today.
Oh, yeah?
Yes. Billy here says, my friend, WWE is a television company with stars that draw. Well, actually, you're wrong right off the bat right there, my friend. AEW will be a wrestling company for marks who want flips, dives, and no selling. How are we supposed to take them seriously when Tony Khan says they're based on wins and losses? You know it's fake, right? Coming out of the woodwork today. Coming out of the woodwork. This person here says, if the biggest wrestling company in the world is losing ratings and viewers by record numbers each week, if you're Turner, TNT, or any other TV company, why would you consider giving an unproven wrestling company a television deal? Well, because that unproven wrestling company put together a show called All In that sold out and did great business. And that same company, there was a show that was set up in, what was it, SummerSlam weekend was when tickets were put on sale? So tickets were put on sale for Madison Square Garden last August. This was right before ROH and the Bucks and everybody worked together to put together All In. So the presumption by everybody who was buying tickets was that the Bucks and Cody and Kenny Omega and all of those guys were going to be on that Madison Square Garden show. Those tickets sold out immediately, okay? They, with zero television, with nothing but a YouTube show, sold 500,000 shirts at Hot Topic, okay? This is why companies are giving them a chance, because they, in fact, do have a proven track record of doing all of that without television. So the presumption by these companies is, well, if they have national television, there's a very good chance that we could really do something here. So that's why.
Well, and it's a good sales job from a captive listener. It has been rumored to be TNT or Turner the whole time, so they have obviously been interested the whole time. It helps to have money from a guy who not only his family owns a National Football League team, but also owns a Premiership team that automatically makes you one of the richest people in the world. You know, by default, there's money there. So there's all of these things and the possible being sold on the opportunity of being able to take advantage of WWE. Can you beat WWE? No, of course you can't. But can you claw some of that away, take some of what they've lost, show those companies or show that company, hey, we can get back to, you know, those people and build upon these new ones that we have here that aren't WWE fans? Yeah, hey, it is what it is. We'll have to see how it all plays out, but I can see how this is happening right now. And again, the Tony Khan money aspect of this helps immensely.
I'd like to add, by the way, this does have to do with AEW, but I'd been asked about this 2 weeks ago, and it took me 2 weeks to get the answer after asking around, but Aja Kong is still on. Apparently she has not been mentioned or advertised at all since the initial announcement, and people were worried that she wasn't going to be there, but she is still scheduled. So that is the update on that. And you know what? I hate to use a personal analogy here, but I will, because I can also plug my book here. Got a new book coming out, everybody. 100 Things WWE fans should know and do before they die. The link is up on my Twitter, at Bryan Alvarez, if you want to head up there and check that out. I got a book deal in 2003 or 4, okay? And I'd never written a book before. And granted, Artie Reynolds was my co-author, and he had written the WrestleCrap book. But you
wrote Dirty Stories for Penthouse.
You could have said, why would you give Bryan Alvarez a book deal? He's never written a book before. It's ridiculous. Well, the answer was I did have a following, and so they gave us a book deal, and we sold over 80,000 copies. So the idea that, well, you can't give someone a TV deal, they've never been on TV, it's ridiculous. I mean, do they have a following? Yes. Have they done things and been successful at them without TV? Yes, many of them. They've done things that, like WWE was I'm trying to remember the story of how the whole deal went down, but I mean, WWE was baffled at the number of tickets the number of T-shirts they sold through Hot Topic. Because it doesn't make sense, but it happened. And so that's success that people can look at and go, hey, let's try something with these people.
Oh, man. Fulham got relegated. And as a Newcastle fan, you know, I know what that's like. So I'm sorry, they're not in the top league anymore in the UK and in England. They are in the second tier now. So, hard times, I'm sure, online over there for Tony Khan.
This person here says, do you think with their style AEW can grab fans who no longer watch wrestling, or is it too insider for the masses? Listen, I'm not Tony Khan, okay? But let me tell you something. As a business person, as a wrestler, all right? You need to work for your audience, okay? So the Young Bucks spent years going around the country as independent professional wrestlers, working to their audience. And what the audience was a bunch of ironic fans who liked shtick and comedy and also great wrestling. And so that's what they gave them. It would have been stupid for them to give them something else. So this audience that they have right now, this audience that is grown up with the Young Bucks and Cody and Kenny Omega and everybody, and SoCal Uncensored and the entire crew. This is what this audience desires right now, and so that's what they give them on the Being the Elite television, the YouTube show. Now, if you think that they're going to go on national television before a random audience and give them something super, they're not going to do that. That doesn't make sense.
Well, we don't know that, but...
No, they've already stated they want to do it like Mid-South Wrestling, which was not Insider.
Yes, but you also look at that roster, and you look at... I'm sorry, I grew up with Mid-South Wrestling, and you look at what the roster was of Mid-South Wrestling, and you stand back and you go, okay, let's see how this works and how you update it for a new time. Again, that roster that doesn't jive with what they're talking, but what does jive with what they're talking is bringing in people like Dustin Rhodes, and I'm going to assume Arn Anderson and Jerry Lynn and some of these people that is where you should feel good. That is where I think you should have confidence, or at least have something to latch on to if you're somebody that is looking at this cynically. And there are a lot of people that are, and damn well you should. Nothing survived. This is like being cynical about the new football league and the XFL starting up. It's like, okay, we'll believe it when it happens. We've been sold this bill of goods a zillion times. You know, the last time with Impact and with ROH and what have they done with it and all this stuff. So, yeah, I can see why people are cynical, but if you want to grab onto something, they have made moves in that direction where there are things here and there where it's like, okay, now with the rest of the roster, you know, it depends on how much you like a lot of those guys who are going to be the stars, but we'll have to see how this whole thing plays out. Again, this is going to be great for banter and to beat around for the next couple of months.
Mid-South Wrestling is not a reference to like a bunch of gritty brawlers. The idea is wins and losses matter.
That's pro wrestling. That's not Mid-South. That's pro wrestling.
Don't peek the mic here. That's the example that they used. Mid-South Wrestling. For those of you that have never watched the Young Bucks in New Japan, okay, you can go to New Japan World and you can find plenty of Young Bucks matches that are not built around shtick and wackiness, but are instead basic traditional pro wrestling tag team matches that are very good, oftentimes built around that whole period where Matt allegedly had a bad back, which, by the way, everybody, turns out he never had a bad back at all. It was all selling in every single one of those matches. His back was never out. He never had a bad back. But he convinced people, including myself and Dave, that he had a bad back.
That's because we didn't send anybody the Cracker Barrel. He was probably like bouncing back and forth in that big old rocking chair they got on the porch. Somebody could answer this question. Nobody does their research anymore. Where's the journalism?
Oh, get out of here. Anyway, the point of this is that's the idea. You can do this style of wrestling with the Chinese wrestlers who do high spots unlike anything anyone here has ever seen before. So it can be done with anybody. Let's go to the phones here. You're on the air. What is going on?
Yes, hi. I'd like to talk about the over-commercialization of the WWE product right now.
Yes.
Yes, I couldn't help but notice that they went to a commercial break right at the beginning of that WWE Championship match.
Yes.
And, it doesn't really feel like wrestling anymore. It just feels like I'm watching 3 hours of commercials on Monday and 2 hours of commercial on Tuesday.
Well, let me tell you something about these commercials, my friend, because I was watching, of all things, a WCW Monday Nitro during the second Vince Russo run, which is the worst string of television there's ever been, and that includes Raw Today, okay? I don't remember what the match was, doesn't matter, but there was a babyface and there was a heel, which, by the way, is astonishing if you ever watched that run, because you can't figure out who the babyface and heels are, but there was definitely someone that people didn't like, and there was someone that people did like. And they start the match, and they do some stuff, and then all of a sudden the heel did something dastardly, and the babyface is there, and he's they got a close-up on his face, and they went to commercial. And I thought, Jesus, God almighty, even they know how to do this right. Like, that's the whole thing. Your hero is suddenly in trouble, and they go to the break. You got to stick around and find out if they're going to be able to get out of this problem. That's when you go to commercial. These people in WWE, they're like, well, someone's going to do a dive, which we think the fans will find exciting. And we'll go to the commercial then, because the fans will think, well, we don't want to miss any of the excitement. But now it's like a pattern. Like, you just know there's going to be a dive, and it's going to be a commercial, and you're going to come back, and there's going to be chin locks. You never see the heat. So there's no way to ever get invested in any of the characters, because I don't even know how Finn Balor got laid out. Like, he hit a dive before the break, and then I come back and Baron Corbin's got him in chinlock. How could I possibly care about that?
Well, and you know what, dude? When people bitch about, like, people doing, spots anywhere else, it's like in New Japan or anywhere, it's like, do you watch these matches in WWE? I mean, or are you only watching the clip for them because you don't actually really watch the show, like a lot of people seem to be doing? Because, like, the thing with the Usos where, like, there's always this in every match, and granted it's wrestling, but it's like all the choreographed spots with, like, Rowan doesn't move that fast, and he's like moving around for super kick to this to that, and then catching both Usos outside the ring and stopping them like it's a cartoon. And it's like, again, you talk about anybody else with their spots. I mean, this happens in every WWE match too. It's ridiculous.
This fella here says, I'm just asking who wants to see sports and fake fighting on a wrestling show. Casuals watch for Attitude Era stuff. Well, first off, there aren't any casuals watching WWE today at all. And if you watch the Raw ratings from this past Monday, like, a bunch of teenage boys turned off the wrestling show to watch sports.
It's the sport and the story, and playoff sports provide you that and a story, the same way that Eddie Guerrero and Rey Mysterio and Dominic provided everyone a story to sink their teeth into. Meanwhile, the sport still was there too. In that case, did the story take precedence in the sport over the sport? Yes, it did. But did they play into each other? Yes, it did. That's how it's supposed to be done. It's not that stinking hard.
He says, if AEW... I just love this line. This is the people we're dealing with here. If AEW doesn't have storylines and just 9-star matches, they will go out of business. They're not going to do that, dude. Have you ever watched one episode of Being the Elite? If you go back 6 months and watch Being the Elite for 6 straight months, there are 25 storylines on every one of those Being the Elite episodes. And you know what? They all continue to the next show, and the next show, and the next show, and the next show, and they all play out until a conclusion. I can't say that for WWE. Being the Elite is doing a much, much better job with consistent storylines that actually they're preposterous, but they're consistent storylines that make sense over a long period of time. I can't even get WWE to make sense from Monday to Tuesday. Somebody sent a list here of, it was supposed to be 3, and then Vince changed it to 4, but in fact there were 5 people that switched sides on both Monday and Tuesday. They can't keep anything straight. Kevin Owens here trying to cost Kofi Kingston the match, even though Kevin Owens gets a title shot against Kofi at the pay-per-view. Why would he cost him the title? It doesn't make sense.
Well, he always beats Sammy, so he's...
And these dingbats trying to explain to me how it does make sense, and I'm like, get out of here, it doesn't make sense. You're trying to create a reality that does not exist. Back in a moment, Observer Live. Back in the show, Bryan Alvarez here, Wrestling Observer Live. I'm Mike Sempervive, also of WrestlingObserver.com. This person says the idea is that Kevin Owens calls Kofi a weak champion, but in his mind he thinks he can't beat him, so he thinks he has a better shot at beating Sami Zayn, so he tried to make him the champion. That is a fascinating storyline that you made up in your mind, okay? But what actually happened on TV, there was no tournament that Kevin Owens won to get a championship match. There was no number 1 contenders match that Kevin Owens won to get a championship match. What happened was Kevin Owens turned on Kofi Kingston, and Kofi Kingston challenged him to a match, okay? This is about Kofi Kingston versus Kevin Owens, and Kofi happens to be the champion. This is not about Kevin Owens has earned himself a championship match, and he gets a title shot against whoever's the champion. That was never the story. If you want to make that the story, if you want to make it up in your own mind for this to make sense, go for it. No. But the actual story is, it is a feud between Kevin Owens and Kofi Kingston, and Kevin Owens and Kofi Kingston are going to fight at the pay-per-view, and Kofi happens to be the champion. If he loses that match, yeah, they could say, oh, well, he's going to face Sami Zayn then. That's stupid. That doesn't even make sense in the storyline. If you want to pretend it makes sense, because you don't like AEW, go for it.
But you know what? If you wanted to insert that aspect, then you have Corey Graves. In courts, only Corey Graves go, well, you know what? You know, if Sammy wins this, you know, Kevin, they're friends right now. You know, Kevin's beaten him a bunch of times. I was there in NXT, and then they move on. If you want to plant that seed, they didn't plant that seed because it's got nothing to do with the story. Because as you said, the story was supposed to be Kevin Owens is so pissed at Kofi Kingston for stealing his spot. Pissed at him, not pissed at him losing his title to his friend.
We're out of time, everybody. Mike is on a vacation from here on out. Till Monday, I believe. But fear not, in the studio tomorrow. Live also at video.f4wonline.com will be filthy Tom Lawler. You can look forward to that tomorrow on Wrestling Observer Live. Got a lot of great stuff coming up tonight, including the Bryan and Vinny Show with Adam Cole versus Matt Riddle NXT show, which I cannot wait for, and WWF Superstars from 1992, which I guess I also can't wait for. We'll talk about it tonight. Thanks for listening, everybody. We'll talk to you next time. Wrestling Observer Live.